Я начну с предложения оценить то, как компания видит рынок искусственного интеллекта. Эта отрасль растет значительными темпами в связи с технологическими прорывами последних десятилетий и в связи с социальными, экономическими и демографическими причинами. No, back, please. Объем мы оцениваем, что к 2027 году объем превысит более 400 миллиардов долларов. В эти цифры входят не только аппаратное обеспечение, которое растет, но и наиболее значительный рост показывает программное обеспечение, а также растут связанные с этим сервисы. Также мы видим значительный рост в сегменте хранения и обработки данных. Аналитики подсказывают нам, что за период с 2022 по 2025 год мы ожидаем, что объем хранимых данных превысит весь тот объем, который был создан за всю историю человечества, превысит 180 зеттабайт. Каждый из нас, основная масса этого объема приходится на потребительский сегмент, и каждый из нас участвует в формировании этого объема, поскольку у каждого из нас с собой несколько носимых устройств, которые даже вне периодов активности формируют некоторые данные. Кроме того, меняется структура проникновения искусственного интеллекта в нашу жизнь. Многие компании переходят от стадии исследования к стадии внедрений. Я приведу пример. Например, первые сервисы голосовых и текстовых помощников были представлены примерно 12 лет назад. Технологии того времени не оправдывали наших ожиданий, но сегодня, спустя 12-13 лет, каждый из нас, я полагаю, их использует. При этом никто на настоящий момент не удивляется тому, насколько быстро мы преодолели этот этап. То есть 20 лет назад мы думали, что это невозможно. 10 лет назад мы видели, что это возможно, но это не оправдывает наших ожиданий. Сегодня мы это используем и считаем это частью нашей жизни. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Я полагаю, что эта картинка вам знакома. Это игра Doom. Но это не та игра Doom, к которой вы привыкли. Эта игра сгенерирована искусственным интеллектом. Перед вами статья, которую опубликовала исследовательская лаборатория Google буквально несколько недель назад, в конце августа. Идея заключается в том, что исследователи задались вопросом, можно ли сгенерировать интерактивную компьютерную игру, то есть интерактивную в том смысле, что в ней можно действительно играть без использования непосредственно кода самой игры. Это было сделано с путем тренировки сетевой модели Stable Diffusion, дополненной технологиями захвата средств управления игры на нескольких игровых сессиях реальных игроков. И в результате мы получили интерактивную модель, которая позволяет в действительности играть. Почему это важно на настоящий момент? Мы оцениваем объем рынка игровой индустрии гейминга в более чем 200 миллиардов долларов в год. А это означает, что с теми инструментами, которые на настоящий момент общедоступны каждому, разработка пойдет в значительной мере быстрее. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Следующий пример из области фундаментальных и естественных наук. Исследовательский центр ЦЕРН, в частности, занимается последствиями столкновения частиц. Эти исследования проходят не только на натурных экспериментах, когда непосредственно в андронном коллайдере разгоняются частицы и исследуются последствия столкновения, но также и на синтетических данных, которые синтезируются рядом численных и статистических методов. Для синтеза этих данных используются мощности вычислительного центра ЦЕРН. Вычислительный центр представляет собой вычислительный кластер, состоящий из 11 тысяч серверов, которые включают в себя 470 тысяч вычислительных ядер. Все это потребляет более 3 мегаватт мощности, электрической мощности, и это дополняется еще 1 мегаваттом мощности, который необходим на питание инженерной подсистемы, которая обеспечивает работу дата-центра. Так вот, для формирования статистических данных, необходимых для начала натурных испытаний, требуется примерно половина мощности этого дата-центра. Формирование одного результата занимает примерно сутки. Исследовательская команда задалась вопросом, можно ли ускорить эти операции путем применения нейросетевых моделей и путем применения искусственного интеллекта. Были взяты мощности всего одного графического сопроцессора. Нейросетевая модель была обучена на реальных данных, которые имелись в наличии у исследовательской команды. И впоследствии формирование результатов заняло чуть более 5 секунд. То есть примерно в 8000 раз быстрее формировался каждый результат. Точность этих результатов была заведомо и ожидаемо ниже, но они использовались не для проведения реальных экспериментов, а они использовались для оптимизации работы дата-центра, ресурсы которого были немедленно распределены между другими задачами, и тем самым была достигнута значительная экономия электроэнергии, сокращено количество выбросов тепла, и в ту же единицу времени дата-центр мог выполнять другие важные задачи и получать реальные результаты. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Таким образом, мы видим, что искусственный интеллект становится тем инструментом, который ведет нас к оптимизации, позволяет нам создавать новый контент, защищает нас от ошибок и по ходу развития технологий, по ходу роста вычислительных мощностей, по мере роста датасетов, по мере роста объема хранимых данных, которые мы можем использовать для обучения нейросетей, мы видим, что эти результаты можно будет продолжать бесконечно. Генерация нового контента, оптимизация работы сотрудников, защита от ошибок, связанных с человеческим фактором в критически важных отраслях, таких как управление полетами или медицина. И мы в компании считаем, что искусственный интеллект станет не просто приятным дополнением к бизнесу, а станет обязательным условием для успешной конкуренции и успешного развития современных компаний. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Но на этом пути есть и риски. Мы оцениваем, что примерно треть попыток внедрения заканчивается неудачей. Позвольте, я перечислю риски. Значит, в первую очередь мы видим, что сложность современной IT-инфраструктуры, необходимой для внедрения такого рода, является дорогим билетом в индустрию, и который потенциально при наличии ошибки может разрушить экономику потенциального применения искусственного интеллекта. Далее следуют недостатки данных, которыми владеют компании и которые будут использоваться для обучения нейросетевых моделей. Данные заказчиков зачастую разрознены, зашумлены, находятся в изолированных средах, недостаточно защищены, и компании боятся предоставить их для обучения. Следом следует недостаток профильных IT-специалистов и профильной IT-экспертизы. Это является одним из самых значительных препятствий для внедрения искусственного интеллекта, для преодоления которой требуется не только значительный объем финансирования, но и время, а также значительные усилия для сохранения этих специалистов. Кроме этого, мы видим, что встают вызовы, связанные с ответственностью использования искусственного интеллекта. Современная регуляторика и этические аспекты только формируются, и необходимо пристальное внимание экспертного сообщества к такого рода вопросам. Поэтому мы видим, что это гонка, в которой можно не только вырваться вперед, но и ошибиться и отстать. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Что мы предлагаем и как мы видим нашу стратегию в этом поле? Компания стремится предоставить возможность каждой компании внедрять технологии искусственного интеллекта для повышения продуктивности и оптимизации своей деятельности. Мы видим несколько направлений, куда мы прикладываем точек приложения своих усилий по исследованию и разработке. Мы выделяем индивидуальные технологии, корпоративные, а также публичные. В индивидуальном сегменте мы фокусируемся на кастомизации и персонализации устройств и интерфейсов, которые повышают продуктивность каждого человека, а также защищают сотрудников от ошибок. В корпоративном сегменте мы предоставляем компаниям возможность проводить инновации, трансформировать свой бизнес, а также делать это безопасно и ответственно. Следующий, пожалуйста. Как мы это делаем? Значит, компания Lenovo является крупнейшим в мире производителем суперкомпьютеров. Если мы взглянем на список топ-500, то примерно треть инсталляций будет произведена на нами. При этом мы не просто производим вычислительные мощности, мы сопровождаем те процессы, которые сопутствуют эксплуатации данного оборудования, а также значительное внимание уделяем способам сокращения совокупной стоимости владения этого оборудования. Причем делаем это не только в фокусе собственного дата-центра компании, но и в преломлении услуг, предоставляемых как сервис. Основными целями внедрения искусственного интеллекта, основными вызовами для внедрения искусственного интеллекта с точки зрения корпоративных заказчиков является простота, доступность и отсутствие рисков. Мы формируем команду экспертов, которая готовит драфты решений для сокращения рисков и оптимизации этих процессов. Кроме этого, мы формируем команду экспертов, которые входят в комитет по ответственному использованию искусственного интеллекта, которые будут изучать лучший мировой опыт, а также фокусировать его на региональные особенности. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. С точки зрения IT-инфраструктуры мы предоставляем наиболее полное портфолио технологий и вычислительных мощностей, необходимых для такого рода внедрений. Начиная с высокопроизводительных рабочих станций для индивидуальных сотрудников, двигаясь вперед к ядру дата-центра, к системам хранения и управления данных, а также к периферийным вычислениям, которые необходимы в тех областях, где необходима высокая скорость принятия решений, именно там, где формируется наибольшее количество данных, то есть на периферии. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Кроме этого, мы формируем комьюнити и экосистему партнеров, в которую на настоящий момент входят более 50 компаний, совместно с которыми мы сформировали более 160 драфтов решений для различных вертикалей и сегментов бизнеса, которые позволяют ускорить процессы внедрения искусственного интеллекта и получить более целостный результат. Мы распространяем свое портфолио на все рынки, в которых присутствуем. Это более 180 стран. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. Теперь немного о процессе, о workflow. Как мы это делаем? Значит, на первом этапе компания оценивает применимость искусственного интеллекта в той конкретной предметной области, в которой потенциально работает наш заказчик. Далее мы строим экономическое бизнес-обоснование и дорожную карту применения искусственного интеллекта. На следующем этапе мы формируем пилотный проект, строим базу для формирования первых результатов и оцениваем их. И далее переходим непосредственно к внедрению, масштабированию и сопровождению этой деятельности. В этом процессе мы гарантируем нашим компаниям то, что по мере развития технологий, по мере хода времени, те решения, которые будут внедряться, будут соответствовать ожиданиям заказчиков и их потребностям. Следующий слайд, пожалуйста. И на этом у меня все, коллеги. Я приглашаю всех заинтересованных на наш стенд, если у вас есть вопросы, и для более подробного обсуждения деталей. Благодарю вас.
Спасибо большое за презентацию. Было очень интересно и информативно. The next speaker will be Sinchan Banerjee.
Hi there. My name is Sinchan Banerjee. I'm part of DataVolt. I'm the AI director there. I'm based out of the San Francisco office. And so today I will be kind of highlighting more of the history of high-performance computing and how did we get here. High-performance computing meant something very different 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I'll kind of highlight that. I think my previous speaker did a great job of touching upon a few of those points, so I'll kind of go a little deeper on that next. What was high-performance computing? Traditional supercomputers, when you hear the term, was made by people like Cray, IBM, NEC. These guys were putting in tons of CPUs, so central processing units, not GPUs. And this was the main way to do things. About 20 years ago, I used to work with the American National Laboratories, so things like Los Alamos Labs, all of these guys. What they would do is And they would buy these extremely massive supercomputers, so tens of thousands of CPUs designed for scientific research. So things like simulating how a chemical will unfold once you hit it with another chemical. So molecular interaction, things of that nature. And the way these things were done were very different. So next slide. We'll go into some of that next. Yeah, so things that come to mind when you're looking at traditional supercomputers were things like, hey, you're doing parallel processing similar to GPUs, but there's a strict difference. You're trying to do sequential tasks. You're trying to say, hey, if I have this molecule coming in, how are the electrons going to hit each other? So when two molecules interact, you're going to write a lot of code saying that, okay, next this will happen. The vector location will go this way, all of this kind of stuff. So very different way of approaching this technology. The way AI works right now with GPUs, all of the advancements that have made it so that instead of running a simulation over many days, you can do it over a few minutes, as my previous speaker demonstrated. Those things have come about because we've shifted away from CPUs and how we were coding them to GPUs and how these new AI models work. Before, you would be worried about, how do you process all of this information? How do you run the simulation over tens of thousands of CPUs? Now you're worried more about, okay, there's this esoteric model, a large language model, for example. People are still trying to understand how they exactly work, but they do know that if you can put in a ton of GPUs, you can train these models with a lot of parallel processing, a lot of matrix multiplication, things of that nature, you can get a model which can simulate intelligence and do a lot of these simulations in a much faster way. Next slide. So yeah, we started off with supercomputers, which were made by Cray, giant rooms of supercomputers, tons of CPUs. Now we've come to a world where initially GPUs were for complex graphics, right? For things like the games that we've seen before. And even now, a lot of gaming engines, they're all about GPU processing. So how did we start using GPUs to do scientific simulations, to do AI? This started about basically because we realized that some of these models, which were invented a long time ago, neural networks, 1970s, early research, but we realized that if we replicated those models on large-scale GPU systems, we can get surprising amounts of intelligence to come out of it. And that's when researchers started saying, hey, wait a minute, let's stop doing tens of thousands of CPUs and see what we can do on a GPU-based system. With that in mind, people like NVIDIA started creating CUDA, which made it so that you could implement these kinds of models, these kinds of simulations far more easily. If you looked at how someone would be coding for a supercomputer, how would they actually write that code? It was very complex. You would have to understand, how do I break up this task of this molecule hitting this other molecule into something that can be run in parallel across tons of CPUs? Now with CUDA, you can do that far more easily. There's other software that's built on top of CUDA, like TensorFlow from Google, which makes this far more easy to do. And after TensorFlow came out, we started optimizing GPUs for even more specific kinds of hardware. So you'll see people like Google coming out with TPUs these days. You'll see more optimized solutions coming from Cerebras, other companies out there, right? And so with this in mind, we've seen a drastic shift in high-performance computing over the past 20 years. It went from giant rooms in specific national laboratories, in specific research institutions, to now data centers having GPUs at scale, running these models for inference, training these models, all sorts of things happening in a very different way. The way these things are being approached is less of, okay, we're going to write code that simulates a step-by-step interaction, and more of a, let's train a model that has some level of intelligence, and let us get that to actually predict something for us. So with that in mind, next slide. Right now, let's get into who are providing these kinds of GPUs-based computing infrastructure for the world. So there's just a few names here. There's a lot more out there. Datavolt, our company here, is also offering GPU-based superpods so that we're actually able to provide high-performance computing in today's world. So not just CPU-based research, but also GPU-based training and inference workloads. We're working with our partners across the world to figure out what is the latest technology that we can bring to this region and to the Middle East. A lot of this stuff right now, because it's moving so fast, it's not something where we say, oh, today, these are the GPUs we want, let's bring it in, and we're done. You have to predict what's going to happen 1 year down the line. What is OpenAI going to be using in terms of training 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, and place these orders, set up a data center accordingly. And so with that in mind, next slide. One interesting thing that I do want to point out is that high-performance computing traditionally was something restricted only to these national laboratories. If you wanted to simulate weather conditions, things of that nature, you needed access to very specialized hardware, very specialized researchers who could code on those hardware platforms. Now, you can do that kind of prediction simulation far more cost-effectively and really easily. You can hook into Datavolt, AWS, get access to GPU, and run a simulation really cost-effectively, right? And with $10, $20, you can start running GPU-based simulations very quickly. So this can be anything from individuals trying to learn how do I do a weather simulation for tomorrow based on an image of a radar of the sky today. Can I predict the future weather 4 hours from now, right? A lot of this research has come out, and students can replicate this very easily without access to specialized hardware. These complex simulations that researchers traditionally had to be at a very specific institution for, now you can do it here. Researchers in Uzbekistan can do it without access to a Cray supercomputer, which costs billions of dollars. And so with that in mind, things have changed quite a bit, and HPC has become democratized to the world, which is going to incite a lot of new research, a lot of new innovation across the world, and I'm really excited to see it. Next slide. So yeah, this concept of predicting what is going to be needed by the industry a year from now, 2 years from now. This is mainly because these models that were listed here, these are some of the earliest models in this large language model revolution, right? So we have GPT-3, Llama, BERT, training time of months, weeks, days, and this is shifting dramatically just based on what training techniques the leaders like OpenAI, Anthropic are working on and using to train their models. The hardware they're using is shifting dramatically. And so 1 year down the line, 2 years down the line, how training looks like for these large language models is going to be very different. And we're going to have to basically gamble and try to predict the future in order to see what do we need hardware-wise for this high-performance computing? In our Datavolt data centers, what kind of infrastructure do we need so that 3, 4 years down the line, you are still getting the latest and greatest technology out there, and you're able to run models at scale very efficiently. Next slide. So yeah, AI's influence on human high-performance computing. There's a lot we can do here, and this is what Datavolt is really excited to explore in these regions, is understanding not just these very fancy use cases in terms of drug discovery, how do you do these scientific simulations, quantum computing, how do you make breakthroughs in terms of mathematics, and what kinds of architectures will produce sustainable, efficient supercomputing in the future, and quantum computing in the future. But also, how do you work with the manufacturers here? Even Datavolt's parent company, Vision Invest, has a lot of power infrastructure in the region. How do we make it so that it's more optimized and is working better than ever with the help of AI, right? So we're going to come into this region, we're working with the government enterprises here and trying to understand what are your needs and how do we bring the latest and greatest from the San Francisco Silicon Valley market into this region so that you're working with the latest technology. You're not just trying to get GPT-3 or Llama and just try to make it work. You're getting the latest models, the latest products out here. Next slide. Yeah, so where do we go from here? Like we're talking about a year down the line, 2 years down the line. It's up in the air, honestly. Things are changing so fast. Even if you ask OpenAI what is going to happen a year from now, they don't really know. There's breakthroughs happening every day, and each new GPU chip that's coming out, how they're training these models is shifting dramatically. It's not necessarily about a bigger model. It's not about training a 400 billion parameter model. Smaller models are getting better and better. So things that can run on your phone are getting better and better. So what we're going to see is going to be very interesting. You can experience, or you can basically predict that there's going to be large-scale infrastructure as we're building at Datavolt. You're going to see quantum computing come into play. This is a very fancy technology that they're still trying to get a hold of and control and make reliable. But as soon as that comes out, I believe that is going to unlock more different types of training and computation for the AI market and high-performance computing in general. And then edge cloud, of course. This is that question of, do we have large models that are sitting in our data centers, or do we actually have smaller models that's at the power plant running locally and is able to give you inference on the fly? Let's say, hey, we have a sensor for a temperature unit. We're getting a lot of data from it. Are we going to be able to predict when it's going to fail, or there's some anomaly in the data center or in the power plant really quickly and locally, right? So a lot is happening, and it's all in different directions. It's not necessarily bigger is better. It's about working smarter, learning what's going on in the market right now, and how do we make that happen better. Next slide. I think we're almost at the end. Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you so much. I think it's exciting to learn how we got here, and it's especially important because we are not sure where it's going. So knowing what we were doing in the past and how it has shifted will help us predict 2-3 years down the line where we need to be as Datavolt, as Uzbekistan, and as the world in general. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such insightful presentation. Now I believe that everybody understands why we're using GPU instead of CPU. And also, I have mentioned that a couple of images were built by an AI. I believe it has, or DALL-E or something related to this. Next speaker will be Ahmed Eid. So please, I would like to share with you stage.
Can you hear me now? Was clear? Okay. It's closer like this one. Okay, perfect. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Ahmed Eid. I'm leading the pre-sales for Dell Technology. And my plan actually today is to go through. It's not working. I'll make it like this better. Yeah. Okay. So the idea today, actually, about the presentation today is that I'm going to go through how we can accelerate the journey of AI. And I'm going to go with the approach from Dell perspective, Dell Technology. But I believe the approach that we're going to follow today in the presentation, any other government or any institute or any companies can follow the same way as well. So can we go to the next slide? Yes, this one. So from Dell perspective, when we start to approaching the AI discussion and the AI stuff, the whole idea from our perspective that we consider it as a sort of a factory. And if you think about it this way, yes, it's better. Thank you. Thank you. So if we think about it this way, the factory for AI simply, it is actually has an input, which is the data that you have, and it has at the end the outcome of any factory is the use cases here. And whatever we have in the middle here, it is exactly what we need to build in all our organization in order to be able to create an AI use cases and to reach to the right outcomes that we're looking for. So I will start with different things. So we'll go through each one of them just to let you understand how we should approach your AI target, your AI business outcome as well. So let's start with the data part. If you can go for the next slide, please. So today, what we see actually in the market, and I had a chance to meet a lot of customers, a lot of government, when we start talking about AI, the main challenging point is related to the data. Because you cannot reach to a real use cases that you really want to work on it unless you have the right data in place. As you can see here today in the market and even in all the organization, you have a lot of sources for data on the system today. Many sources. You have structured data, you have unstructured data. Sometimes you have some text file in the organization. Sometimes you have some data coming out of the sensors. So you have a lot of data that you have currently in your organization. How we can use this data in order to use them to create a meaningful and business outcome for your AI use cases. So the idea here, as you can see here, the main challenge that we are facing today, maybe you have a lot of data, which is great, but this data is not ready for AI usage. It cannot be used for using in your AI LLM model or whatever. So you need to work on this data, and that's why you need actually a data scientist, a data engineer, who has to work on all of this in order to make sure that the data is ready to be consumed by your AI model. The good thing is that actually as part of Dell Factory, and as I mentioned, that's what we're calling their AI Factory, that we created actually a middle layer here. It's called Dell Data Lakehouse. And this is a layer which is doing some sort of aggregation across all your data sources. Still, you need a scientist. You still need a data engineer. But at least we make the life for this data engineer much easier because we have now an appliance that can help you to aggregate all your data sources and make it ready for your data scientists to start consuming, for your training, for your pre-training, even for creating your platform for next step. So, as I mentioned, this is the first point, which is preparing your data. Because in my view, the data is your raw material to create a real use case for your AI. So any company, any organization has to start first by making sure that they have the right data and ensuring that they are making your data ready for your AI consumption. So we can go to the next step now, where we'll go into the other area. So you have your data now. You make your data ready for your consumptions. You need to have the right infrastructure. You need to have an ecosystem on top of it. I will go more deep into the ecosystem, but let's start with the infrastructure here. Where we are building our factory, we need infrastructure, we need ecosystem, we need some services around it. So let's go around the infrastructure. And I want to mention something very important here about infrastructure. Maybe it is some of the things that I read it actually even on Microsoft itself. When Microsoft started training their Llama actually model, if you hear about how actually what they faced during the training of this model, it's not that easy. The infrastructure for AI is completely different from any other infrastructure. And here I'm not talking only about GPUs, because GPUs, of course, is very important for AI training, but I'm talking about other objects as well. I'm talking about GPUs. You need to consider your networking. You need to consider your storage. You need to consider how you are going to protect your data later on as part of your AI. So if I can go to the next slide here. So in Dell as well, we try to work very closely on the AI by building the AI particular infrastructure just to serve your AI needs. It is the same servers that we're using, but we have a completely different family only for AI, where we have different compute model. And in this compute model, we're working on most of the GPUs manufacturing, like NVIDIA, like AMD. We don't have any preferences here, but we are working with all AI models. The compute that we're producing here, it is really actually suitable for the AI, because if you think about the AI today and you would like to do a training in one of your data center, the amount of cooling, the amount of heating that's being produced by the GPU servers is huge. So we need to think about the way how you can reduce this kind of consumptions. That's why we start creating a compute which has liquid cooling compute, the compute which have very low actually footprint when it comes to the carbon footprint, which need very low cooling requirement. So this is on the compute side. On the networking side, as I mentioned, like we just talk about the supercomputer now. We just talked about HPC, where we need to have a lot of networking connecting all your nodes in order to get the aggregation power of your servers. So the network is very important, and also the storage, because Again, you are consuming the data, you're injecting data, so you need a completely different level of storage performance for AI. So with all of this, as part of an infrastructure, you need to consider. Again, I need to mention here, like, maybe this is the approach to the story actually of AI, but this is something that you need to consider, no matter actually which vendor you are using, that you need to have a completely different way of approaching when it comes to infrastructure as well. The good thing about Dell here, when it comes to the compute, we created some sort of, what we call it, like, it's like a complete engineered solution with NVIDIA as of today, where you have a clear, like, it is like t-shirt sizes, like we have small, medium, large, based on the models that you would like to train. So today, if you think that your data will require this amount of parameters, this amount of training, let's say 70 million, 50 million, whatever number of parameters that you have, we have a t-shirt size that you can just deploy it and start working on it immediately. So this is the infrastructure piece. Let's go for the ecosystem piece. We can go for the next slide, please. We can go also for the next slide. So here in the ecosystem piece, I mean, as part of our factory, we integrated many of the tools that needed for the data engineering and data science as well. You see here actually in the middle, we have NVIDIA, but we also have many other tools as part of AI Factory. And when I'm talking about AI Factory, I'm speaking about an engineered solution between Dell and all those companies that can be a starting point for you. And instead of building everything from scratch, and instead of doing everything by yourself, you have something ready that you can start with. And by the way, I'm not sure if you are familiar with those tools, especially these two tools. They are very critical tools for something called today MLOps. MLOps, which is very critical for any implementation today. If you think about it actually, and from experience, we met many companies who are starting the AI journey, but some of them, they stop at the deployment part. Maybe they do some work in the research, but they were not able to move their model from development all the way to the production. And the good thing about the MLOps is that it helps you a lot to reach to this point. There is other tools, of course, in the market. I'm just mentioning here some of the tools here. So this is the ecosystem that's part of our factory. Then we'll continue to the next slide, which is the services. And I think the service is very important because the service is very critical in all the aspects of the AI. You can just go one more slide here. And this is where we are today. For anyone who would like to start an AI journey, I think they have a lot of questions in mind. How I can start, from where I can start, which use cases that is needed for me, how I can evaluate the use cases, actually importance, criticality, the business outcome. So there is a lot of stuff here. And we made it very simple in Dell by creating a service portfolio around all of this. So if you go for the next slide here, I'll try to make it, I know it's a very busy slide, so I'll make it very simple for you. So we make it as, if you see here up here, we have day 0, day 1, day 2, day 2 plus. And day 0, it is actually the day when you start looking into the AI journey for yourself. And here you have a lot of things that you need to do. You need, of course, to define your solution architecture, your vision, your use cases, where you would like to reach. What is your plan? What's the outcome of it? That's why you have many services around this one. In day 1, when you need to start preparing your data, so we have a lot of services around how you can prepare your data, because you need to prepare your raw material to have everything ready for this. Then we have day 2 and day 3, which is related to the deployment of your models, the deployment of your data, and then start operating your environment. So again, this is all services from Dell, by the way, but you still need it. Even if Dell is not there, you still need to do all of this. Don't think about jumping to the conclusion of having a use case. This is not going to work. You need to start from here. You need to start first of all to evaluate what you have. You need to understand where you would like to reach. You need to define your strategy. Then you need to work on your data to make it ready to meet your strategy. And then you can start working on anything. I met many customers, again, and many enterprises in the region, and I see them always starting from here. They're always starting from here, like having GPUs. When you go to talk to your customers, they're just telling you, I want to have some GPUs. I want to have some platform with a lot of GPUs. I want H200 and H2100. I want to have actually other GPUs. But you will have GPUs and you'll have everything in place. But then you will stand still. You're not able where to go after. So please make sure that you're starting all the way from studying, understanding what you need to reach, preparing your data, and all the way to the end. Then here we're speaking about use cases, and use cases here, this is actually the outcome of your exercise. I had some use cases here, just to share it with you. And this being actually part of our factory as well, and we're co-develop these use cases with some of our partners, so it's not only us, because we are really working with many partners when it comes to the factory. And here, as you can see here, many use cases around FSI, financial sector, related to the risk management, related to something related to the chat box, something related to assistant, IT assistant. We have many of those use cases for every industry. And I will not go through all of them. I just want to mention here that this is the end products of your AI. So you need always to think about what is your end product here. It's not about building an infrastructure. It's not only about having people using the AI, but this is the end product. This is the outcome. This is the business outcome. If you're not able to reach to this one, if this outcome not adding any value to your business, then you need to reconsider where you are going to go. If you can go to the next slide, please. And next slide as well. This is one of the things that we did. I'm very actually proud of this one because it was part of our AI factory. This is where we built actually a complete virtual assistant using an AI for some of the banks in the region. And the nice thing about this one that we can of course customize it and we can have, but we have an avatar here, which it is the face of our data in this case. And in this case, we integrated our data, I mean the bank data actually, with the LLM models in order to have a specific view about your large language model. So it's not generic information, it's something related to the bank. And we're using certain technology called RAG on this one. But the idea here, like, unless you have an outcome that really satisfies your business need, please reconsider your AI journey in order to make sure that you're starting on the right step. So this is all from my side. Thank you so much for having us here, and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. That was great. So you have mentioned that for the utilization, you have to use Run AI in combination with the Kubernetes. As a head of department that is responsible for building infrastructure, I would like to add some insight. So the Kubernetes provide ability to slice the GPU, and this is the main things why we are using Kubernetes with Run AI solutions. So. Thank you again. So the last but not least, Mr. Yakov Lifshitz. I would like to introduce you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. And I'm last, and we are running out of time, so I will make my presentation really short. And top tech leaders in the world today agree that within few years, maybe 1 or 2 years, the intelligence of artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence. So the good news is we are probably the last generation that can credibly say that we are smarter than the computers, and our kids will not have this pleasure anymore. So I congratulate you, all of you, with this. And I'll try to make sense of all of the AI space in one short presentation. So please, next slide. And we'll start with the bad news, and the bad news is that size does matter. It's confirmed, and the larger the model is, the better the performance, unfortunately. So this is the OpenAI slide that you see here, and the intelligence of the models will go up with the size of the models together. Even though I would agree with Sanjan that smaller models also perform kind of better, but bigger models still win. So that will require a lot of infrastructure. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the training requires more and more resources, and our friends here presented the tremendous work that is done on the infrastructure side, and the GPU infrastructures and the inference infrastructure for running the models, for training the models. It's extremely complex. and resource intensive. If I read correctly, Data Vault invests huge amounts of money in the region in building the largest data center. So hopefully that will enable flourishing innovation in the AI space, because indeed we need more and more compute. And next slide, please. The good news, however, the GPU also performing better and better, and the latest Blackwell NVIDIA GPU that is expected to be released Q4 is highly anticipated, and many companies actually worry that will not be able to get one. So this is an arms race. The more GPUs you have, the faster the GPUs, the bigger models you can build, the better performance you can achieve. Next slide, please. If you look at the AI market in general, Bloomberg projects that it will reach 1.3 trillion by 2033. And this prediction was made a few months ago, and I would imagine that maybe people would consider it already conservative, given the speed of the development. And you can look at the small startups, presumably small, young startups that started a few years ago. I listed a few here. You can look at the multi-billion-dollar valuations, and 35 billion was invested in the AI space just in the first half of 2024. So not only the GPUs getting better, not only the models getting better, also the amount of money that getting into this business increases exponentially. Next slide, please. And every country needs to have sovereign AI. Every country needs to have control over its own intelligence. Now, this is a controversial topic because there is a big discussion how governments should approach AI. Honestly, this speed of innovation that is going on now is incomprehensible even for the businesses, even for the very experienced enterprises that have been through a lot. When we talk about governments, that becomes almost impossible. Because governments, on top of everything else, they have also all the government level challenges, which is the laws and regulations, the legal frameworks, all the stuff of that sort. But also they need to be basically compete with private enterprises because they need to introduce AI into the government infrastructure, into all the government services, into service to, there are like many different types of projects, internal for the government and external for the citizens, and governments really having a hard time keeping up with the pace of innovation. So whenever country KPIs you have, whenever goals you have as a government and to enhance the startup infrastructure, the accessibility of government services, you, at the end of the day, need to have your own AI. How to achieve that, that's a big question. So next slide, please. There are two choices, and one of them is building your custom LLM, essentially competing against OpenAI, Facebook, and everybody else, or using an open source ones and trying to use those. And large enterprises, small enterprises don't have a choice, so that's easy. Large enterprises and governments actually have a choice, and they're struggling with this choice because there are benefits and drawbacks to each one of them. And building your own custom LLM, unfortunately, is the only way as a long-term strategy for any government, including Uzbekistan or any other government. It reminds me of an old joke that training prolongs your life by 5 years on average, but those 5 years you need to spend in the gym. So training somebody else's open source model or any other LLM, somebody else's LLM will generate an economic growth, will generate the tax revenue only to be paid to the original owner of the technology. So any government at the end of the day will have to make this inevitable choice that they will be building their own LLMs. If you just think about how deep that goes, when you use an LLM, you can ask not only questions that are kind of fact-checking questions, how to do this, how to do that. You not only need to have a perfect language in terms of linguistics, but think about deeper questions. What is the role of a family in the society? What's the historical events? Who owns which land and what's the history and all the other stuff and all the cultural nuances. You can't really take somebody else's platform that was built on 15 trillion tokens like the latest llama, and by fine-tuning it with a little bit of data, essentially create a person who was born and raised in Uzbekistan. That's not going to work. So this is the only choice, but in the short term, given the shortage of resources, you need to do both. You need to start building your own LLM as a country, because that's your independence, that's your future. And you need to use whatever is available to get some short-term progress while you're building that. So we can look at multiple countries that doing this. Let's say United Arab Emirates. If you go to the website u.ae.com, there is a chatbot that is actually powered by ChatGPT. But at the same time, in the UAE, you can go to Falcon, and they're releasing their LLMs that are custom-made. So they are doing both. You can take a look at Saudi Arabia, and they released the Alam project. The Alam version 1 was built on their own custom LLM. The Alam version 2 is a fine-tuned Llama LLM. So they're playing also in testing and doing both. But none of them is giving up this vision of creating their own LLMs. Same way you need to have your own electricity. Same way you probably shouldn't live your life on your neighbor's Wi-Fi. You will end up paying for your own, regardless if you want it or not. Next slide, please. So I cannot name the exact government that we have built this project for, but it's one of the Middle Eastern governments. This is an example of a platform that we have built at Meta Dialogue while advising them on the strategy. We deployed Arabic English LLM with RAG model, as you mentioned, and we collected all the data. We trained it from scratch. It's not a fine-tuned model. You can see some nice looking numbers. We processed over 800 terabytes of data and prepared 1 trillion tokens to be trained on. And it was a 7 billion parameters model trained on actually 500 A100 GPUs. And you can also see the results according to the metrics that are standard in the industry. We actually beat in Arabic GPT 3.5 and GPT-4 on all the metrics except general reasoning on GPT-4, because size unfortunately matters, and GPT-4 is a much bigger model, but it still be a comparable alternative with the beauty that it's your own and you do not depend on somebody else who will basically can switch it off for you, increase the price, or do whatever the hell they want. Next slide. So in our company, we have those unique capabilities. We are one of the very few companies that can actually build those huge LLMs that know how to actually execute this kind of projects. And it requires quite a lot. I will not bother you with details. You had enough details in the previous presentation, so I'll just mention that to scrape the data from the internet, if you want to get an up-to-date LLM, you need a cluster of 10,000 cores, just to give you kind of an idea how complicated it is. But that's what we do, because we see this skill gap between the needs of the government that are basically super clear. You need to build your own, and that's the end of story. You can spin it around, you can say you don't have the budget, you can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, you either build your own, or you will be dependent on another country's LLM, and they will decide, and they will build your next generation culture. And this is the critical thing for every government to understand. The next generation of people will be raised by AI. They will be studying learning from AI. They will be going to school and interacting with AI during their classes. And the question, which values this AI brings to the table, that will be the shape of your nation in next years. So if you want your next generation being raised by Microsoft or any other company, that's completely fine, but that's a choice that needs to be made. It's way more than business ROI, taxes, money, investment, or any other parameter that you're looking at. At the end of the day, it's all about your country, sovereignty. And that's why the CEO of NVIDIA said that every country needs to be in charge of their own intelligence. Otherwise, rich will get richer, poor will get poorer, and that would be the end of story. Next slide. We have few products. You have seen more than enough products already today. So I will not bother you with details. We have the entire infrastructure to run this kind of projects that I just described. It consists of, and one thing that may be worth mentioning, we also able to address the skill gap that governments have because they don't have enough researchers. There are very few people who actually understand those domains today, and it takes yet a lot of time to prepare them. And all of them getting $1 million a year entry salary in Silicon Valley, so for governments it's kind of difficult to attract them. So we are helping to build a national AI excellence center for different governments when they try to get control of their own technology, because the goal is not to sell the government our LLM because they can buy from any other or take any other open source. The goal is to co-create with the government the platform that they will be using, and as part of it to bridge the skill gap that they have and help them to train the people and help them on this journey, that overused word on these presentations, but to help them on their path to the future. I apologize for the banality. And next slide. And I think anybody who is sitting in this room doesn't actually need this slide, because the question, where do you need AI, is similar to asking where do you need electricity. The short version is everywhere. And everywhere anything is getting done, you better do it smart. And that's intelligence. So any sector you're looking at, manufacturing, energy, education, marketing, mobility, construction, any sector you want to deploy AI at the largest scale possible in every single use case, because it changes completely the economics. So that is my last slide. I will leave you with that. And any enterprise or any government that would need any sort of assistance in getting their hands on their own future with creating their custom language models or fine-tuning existing ones, or building an ecosystem for creating LLMs, any kind of project of that sort, that's what we do, and that's what we are good at. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. LLMs now everywhere, I believe. Well, this is the end of our session. The next session about AI in the social goods will start after a short break, after 10 minutes. Thank you.
Traditional methods often fall short in delivering the accuracy and efficiency needed to advance drug formulations. Image provision.